thousands of miles of ocean sailing, we are enjoying the change of pace in the Caribbean. Shorter distances between countries means that we have more time to explore this sailing mecca, where the living is easy. We are Amy and Matt. We spent the last 6.5 years sailing our 37-foot sailboat Florence around the world. In that time, we have crossed 4 oceans and over 46,000 miles have passed under our keel.
Now we have made it back to the Caribbean, we will explore these famous islands before we recross the North Atlantic Ocean to return to where we began this voyage in England.
We're sailing up from Martinique to Guadeloupe. We left last night from Martinique, sailed through the night, pretty breezy through the night, and then as dawn's just breaking this morning, we're coming past Dominica. There's actually quite a lot less wind in the lee of Dominica. We were drifting just now, it's just starting to pick up again. And then we should pop out in some wind past Dominica before we get to Les Saints, which are the southernmost islands part of Guadeloupe. And we're going to stop there and check into the country there. Just looked on the bow's covered in seaweed and flying fish, where we were just ploughing through the waves in the darkness, but it's impossible to film that and show you that, unfortunately. Maybe we'll have that again when we get past the tip of Dominica. There's been so much weed in the water in our entire time here in the Caribbean. This morning I put the line out at dawn, but I kept getting so much weed on it that I had to keep reeling it in and clearing the weed. In the end I just gave up. There's actually been like weed everywhere we've been in the Caribbean. We haven't caught a fish since just before Beckley, and that's just because there's so much weed in the water.
We're just approaching the Saints, which are the French islands which are part of Guadeloupe, and this is actually the furthest north that we've sailed in the Caribbean, so all of the islands north of here are now new territory for us, which is really exciting. It feels good to be coming into somewhere that we haven't been to before. It feels strange to be back to Caribbean sailing where there are so many countries just packed into such a small area, and it only takes like a day sail before you're into the next country, whereas in places like Australia and Indonesia we'd be sailing for months and thousands of miles and still stay within the same country.
The pilot guide we've got for Guadeloupe, well, the pilot guide we've got for the Caribbean is the same one we had when we came through the Caribbean last time 6 years ago, so it's a little bit out of date now. So we've been looking up online the regulations of where you can and can't anchor here, and apparently it's a new thing, but you're not allowed to anchor anywhere in the Saints, so we might have to pick up a mooring, and if there aren't enough moorings then we won't be able to pick up a mooring next to where we can check in, so it may be a little bit tricky, but it's a little bit difficult knowing what's actually true from what's online and what we've got written in our pilot guide. So we're just going to have to go there and see if there's a whole bunch of boats anchored and see if there are any moorings free.
Saints are a group of 9 small French islands, just 5 miles south of Guadeloupe. Only the 2 largest islands are inhabited, and they boast over 300 days of sunshine per year.
So this is the main town in the Saints, which is just south of Guadeloupe. You can just see Guadeloupe here. So it's all part of Guadeloupe, and this is just a small group of islands just to the south. We came here to check in, which took 3 minutes. In fact, it was so quick that we forgot entirely to film it. So easy, you just go into a little internet cafe and type in your own details, and it only costs €3. Super easy to check into French territories. It's a really picturesque area. It's actually quite touristy. There's lots of little bars and restaurants and ice cream parlours, and I'm hoping to check one of those out very shortly. But it's just, yeah, really beautiful. The water here is crystal clear, and it's a really picturesque area. It's really set up for yachts here. There's loads of moorings out there now. We're still not sure if you're allowed to anchor or whether you have to pick up a mooring. So we've picked up a mooring for now to check in, but nobody's come and asked us for any money for it yet. So we might get a shock when a boat comes around. But it's really set up for yachts here. There's loads of moorings. There's dinghy dock here just for you to come in and easily get ashore with your dinghy. Apart from the fact that we didn't see that from where we were on the mooring. So we're up a beach over there somewhere where we carry the dinghy up. Be much easier if we come around to here.
To the highest point on the island because there's absolutely gorgeous views of not only this island but also Guadeloupe and the other small islands in the Saints as well. Such a beautiful day today. There's not a lot of wind for moving on, so we think we're probably going to hang around here for a little bit longer, but also from up here we can see that there's a couple of moorings free on one of the close by islands which are supposed to be really nice. So hopefully they'll still be available by the time we get back down to the bottom.
So we can see Florence just down there safely on a mooring. And when we came here, we weren't sure whether we would be allowed to anchor or how much the moorings were. Now, it turns out that this week, the moorings are actually free, which is great. And you can anchor, but there's only certain areas that you're allowed to anchor in. So all good, we're on a mooring, and we'll try to use moorings as much as possible to limit any damage to the seabed. But if all the moorings are full, then you can anchor just behind the moorings.
This is the real reason that I've been seeking a nice, calm, quiet anchorage. I've been trying to clean and polish the hull for the last few weeks, but the trouble is a lot of the anchorages are either in the trade winds, and so it's really hard to hang on from the dinghy, or they're just so busy that you get a constant stream of boats coming in and loads of wash splashing up against the hull. So yeah, this is the best way to spend such a beautiful, calm day today. Such is boat life.
Amy is the main person that does all the polishing on board, which is really actually important because in the tropics, the sun, the UV just really gets at the gel coat on the boat. And unless you keep it polished, the gel coat goes really porous and then kind of almost just comes off on your hand like a white chalky substance. So it's really important to keep her polished just to keep her to stay in one piece in the tropics. One of the times in life when we really appreciate not having a big boat.
Yes. Yeah, definitely do not want a bigger boat at the moment.
A lot of people absolutely love moorings. They find them really easy to use and much better than using the anchor. But on Florence, we absolutely hate moorings. They're necessary when it's too deep to anchor, and we understand they're useful to stop all the anchors damaging the sea bottom. But what they normally do, like now, is when the boat spins around in an anchorage, they bash against the hull all night long, and we sleep just the other side of this piece of fiberglass here that it's bashing against. So with this one, we end up doing all sorts of things to try and tie the mooring close against a fender, or it doesn't really work. It just squeaks against the fender and still bashes against itself like that. So that's why we really prefer to anchor wherever possible. And the reason we've tied it so close against the fender on this one is because it's got this big metal eye on the top, which if we didn't do this, when the wind swings round and the boat swings round, it just smacks against the hull and it's going to completely destroy the side of Florence. Moorings are okay when there's wind and you're constantly being blown back away from the mooring, so you can just put it on a long line and it doesn't come and hit the hull. But when you're in a calm, sheltered anchorage where you get the occasional gust that just spins the boat round, it just smacks into the hull. And the mooring fields here actually take up a lot of space on the shallower section, so there's actually no space to anchor. The reason that the moorings are free, we found out, apparently, the story is that there was a boat on a mooring and the mooring broke and the boat drifted off and got damaged, and now there's an argument between the people that own the moorings, because the boat had paid for the mooring, about who pays for the damage, and it turns out the moorings haven't been maintained. So that's the other thing. We never trust a mooring. We really do trust our anchor and our anchor chain, and we've been trusting it all the way around the world in really windy conditions. We've not had problems, but moorings, you never know what the state of them is and how regularly they're maintained. And before we get the comment that we should tie on with more than one line, we were tied on with more than one line. I've just untied the other line because we're about to go and sail north up to the main island of Guadeloupe.
Which is an anchorage!
Which is an anchorage where we won't have a mooring buoy bashing against us, but it's going to be a rolly anchorage, so we'll probably just be rolling instead.
We've come halfway up the island of Guadeloupe to an anchorage where we can get some laundry done, because we've heard that it's $20 US a load in Antigua. So we spent this morning doing about a month's worth of laundry. But the real reason that people come here to this specific anchorage is that it's part of the Jacque Cousteau Reserve. And Guadeloupe is known for its underwater life and the clarity of water. So just behind me is Pigeon Island, and that's the famous spot for snorkeling. So we're just going to go and check it out.
Dropping in from the dinghy, we found ourselves in the middle of this huge school of fish.
The water here is beautifully clear, and while the coral and sponges are nice, they're extremely sparse compared to what we saw back in Tobago.
Returning to the dinghy, we rejoined the huge school of jacks. As they lazily circled around us, we reflected that the living in this French part of the Caribbean is certainly easy, and we feel lucky to have been able to experience it.
the really difficult things about filming sailing is that the camera tends to flatten the waves. We've had a few videos where people have commented to say that we've done a really good job of filming the sea state and it actually looks realistic and that the waves look real size. And the only reason that the waves look big in those videos is because in reality they're actually really big. The camera is still flattening the waves. Although the camera will always flatten the waves, there are a few things that you can do to give a more realistic picture of what the sea state is actually like. So today we're sailing between islands in the Caribbean, so we're in a little bit of gap where the open ocean swell from the Atlantic is coming through. It's blown about 25 knots, and the reason that I look a little bit wet is because we've had a few waves over the deck and they've gone right over my head. So one of the main challenges in this sort of sea state is to keep the camera dry because our camera is not weather sealed. So the camera we use as our main camera is a Canon M6 Mark II. For me, my favourite way to shoot the waves is to capture those waves which are just kind of cresting the horizon, or if they're really big, totally obscuring the horizon. And in order to do that, I need to zoom the camera in. So I tend to shoot about 100mm zoom. But the trouble is, when you zoom the camera in, it accentuates any movement. And Florence is already bouncing around. So in order to counteract that, I tend to brace myself as well as I can. And I also will shoot at a much higher frame rate. So I do at 120 frames a second, and then that is slowed down in the edit. And that just helps stabilize everything. And it also allows you to capture that opportune moment where the wave crests the horizon. Another thing that I find helps show the size of the waves, and I really enjoy shooting, is if there's something in that shot that you can compare the size of the waves to, whether that's another boat that's sailing, a ship even, or some high cliffs, and you really then get to see the rolling motion of the swell. To try and get the correct motion blur of the waves, I actually set the camera up manually and have an ND filter, which is like sunglasses for the lens of the camera, and it controls the amount of light that goes into the camera. Although in the video you might see, one or two short clips of waves, in reality I've spent most of my morning watch filling up SD cards and then going through at a later date tons of footage to pick those best 6 seconds of clips which are the most stable and the most in focus.
Next time we have a fast sail on to the contrasting islands of Antigua and Barbuda. One home to super yachts and parties, the other a quiet home to the largest frigate bird colony in the world and amazing turquoise waters.
Don't forget to subscribe to catch the next episode. We release a video every 2 weeks.
If you'd like to find out more about behind the scenes on Florence, track our progress across the oceans in real time, find out where we are right now, or ask us pretty much anything, then please head over to our Patreon site and join the crew. We would like to thank everyone who supports us to make these videos possible, and a special thank you to our star patrons.